Mark Chen had worked alone at Station Echo for 6 years when at 2:47 a.m. on October 12th, the emergency radio, dead since 1994 with no power, crackled to life. A woman's voice begged for help, giving coordinates and a date. Tomorrow. When Mark found fresh blood at those coordinates the next morning, what he discovered would force him to survive a mystery where the call came from someone who died 34 years ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wind hit 40 miles per hour just after 2 a.m., rattling the windows of Station Echo hard enough to wake Mark from his half-sleep at the desk. He'd been a ranger for 6 years, but before that he'd spent 12 years as a Seattle PD detective, and old habits died hard. Sleep came in shifts, awareness never fully shutting down. He sat up, rubbed his face, and checked the weather station readout mounted on the wall. Temperature 34 degrees, barometric pressure dropping, storm system moving in from the north, expected to hit by dawn. Mark stood and stretched, his back protesting. 42 years old and spending nights in a wooden chair wasn't getting any easier. He moved through his hourly routine with the precision of ritual. Check the propane heater, still running, tank at 3/4. Check the radio, standard Forest Service frequency, quiet except for occasional static. Check the logbook, last entry his own from 1 a.m. Nothing unusual to report. Check the perimeter lights through each window, all 4 corners of the compound visible. Motion sensors armed, no alerts. Station Echo sat at 7,200 feet on the north face of Mount Baker, 40 miles from the nearest town and 12 miles from the main ranger headquarters. Cell service didn't exist up here. Satellite phone for emergencies only. During fire season, they staffed it round the clock. October through April, just overnight monitoring, and Mark had claimed every night shift available for 6 years running. Management thought he was dedicated. The truth was simpler. He needed the silence. Seattle had been noise. Sirens and voices and the constant pressure of other people's emergencies becoming his responsibility. Then came the raid that went wrong, his partner Danny taking a bullet meant for him, dying before the ambulance made it through downtown traffic. Mark had walked away without a scratch. That was 3 years before he found the ranger job posting. By then, he'd already stopped sleeping, stopped talking to anyone who wasn't absolutely necessary. Station Echo gave him something close enough. The mountains didn't judge, the wind didn't ask questions, and the overnight shifts meant he rarely saw the day rangers, just left notes in the log and headed down the access road to his cabin, another 2 miles deeper into isolation. He poured coffee from the thermos he'd made at 6 p.m., still hot enough to drink. The station had running water from a spring-fed tank, propane heat, and enough emergency supplies to last 2 weeks if a storm cut off access. The main room served as office, monitoring station, and living quarters. Equipment room in the back, storage closet to the left, sealed since they'd upgraded the radio towers in '94 and moved all the old emergency gear out of rotation. Mark walked to the north window, coffee in hand, and looked out at the darkness. His headlamp beam from earlier had marked the trail down to the lower observation point. In 6 hours, dawn would break, and he'd do his morning perimeter check before the day shift arrived at 8. Same routine, every night, exactly the way he needed it. Then he heard the sound from the storage closet, a crackle of static that shouldn't exist. Mark set his coffee down and listened. The station settled and creaked in the wind constantly. He knew every sound by now, could distinguish between normal expansion and something wrong. This was different, static, faint but distinct, coming from behind the storage closet door he hadn't opened in 6 years. He crossed the room and tried the handle. Locked. The key hung on a pegboard with 17 others, each labeled in faded marker. He found the one marked storage and turned it in the lock. The door opened with a scrape of wood against warped frame. Dust hung thick in the air, visible in his flashlight beam. Metal shelving units lined both walls, stacked with cardboard boxes labeled with dates from the 80s and early 90s. Old incident reports, decommissioned equipment, supply inventories nobody had bothered to move to headquarters. The static was louder now. Mark swept his light across the shelves until he found the source. A Motorola emergency broadcast radio sitting on the middle shelf, covered in dust. The kind they'd used before digital systems took over. No display screen, just analog dials and a speaker grill. He moved closer, checking for a power cord. Nothing. No batteries in the compartment either. The radio sat completely dead. No possible source of electricity. But the static continued, not white noise, structured somehow like a signal trying to break through interference. Mark's detective instincts kicked in automatically. Observe, document, analyze. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. 2:46 a.m. Started a voice recording. October 12th, Station Echo, investigating unknown radio transmission from decommissioned equipment. He aimed the phone at the radio, capturing video. The static wavered, grew stronger, then resolved into something that made his hand tighten on the phone. A voice. Female, young, panicked, breaking through in fragments. Help! North Trail! Bleeding! Mark grabbed the radio, turning it over, looking for any explanation. A hidden battery pack, a wireless receiver, anything. The casing was solid, sealed, no modifications. But the voice continued, clearer now. Can't stop it. 3.7 miles, please. He found a pen in his jacket pocket and grabbed an old inventory sheet from a nearby box, writing down everything he heard. North Trail, 3.7 miles. The coordinates clicked in his head. He knew every trail marker in his sector. That would put her near the ravine overlook. Dangerous terrain, even in good conditions. October 13th. Coordinates north, 48.73, west 1, 21.42. Mark wrote faster. October 13th, tomorrow. She was giving a date for tomorrow. Please find me. Please. The voice dissolved into static, then silence. The radio went completely dead. No hum, no power indicator, nothing. Mark stood in the dusty closet holding a piece of equipment that had no right to function, that had just broadcast an emergency call from someone giving tomorrow's date as if it hadn't happened yet. He played back his phone recording. Clear audio, her voice, the coordinates. All documented. His training said, call it in. But call in what? A ghost radio. A message from the future. They'd pull him off the mountain for psychological evaluation. 6 years of isolation catching up with him, they'd say. Mark looked at the coordinates he'd written down. 3.7 miles up the North Trail. Difficult hike, maybe 3 hours in darkness, 90 minutes in daylight. The woman's voice had been terrified. Real. Whatever was happening, someone needed help. He left the closet, grabbed his topographic map from the desk, and spread it out under the lamp. The coordinates pointed to a section of the North Trail Mark knew well. Rocky terrain, steep inclines, and a ravine system that had claimed 2 hikers over the last decade. The area was marked hazardous on official trail maps. Cell reception non-existent. No camping allowed within half a mile. Mark pulled up the incident database on his laptop, searching for any active missing persons reports in the sector. Nothing current. He expanded the search to the last 6 months. Still nothing. No hikers reported overdue. No emergency beacons activated. No search and rescue operations in progress. He sat back, staring at the coordinates. October 13th, she'd said it specifically, like she was calling from tomorrow, warning about something that hadn't happened yet. The detective in him wanted a rational explanation, but he'd held that radio. No power source, no batteries, and the voice had been immediate, present tense, begging for help. Mark checked the weather forecast. Storm front arriving at dawn, clearing by mid-morning. If he waited for daylight, he'd have better visibility and safer conditions. If someone was actually up there injured, waiting 6 hours could mean the difference between rescue and recovery. He made a decision. He'd hike to the coordinates at first light, document whatever he found, then report it properly with evidence. If he found nothing, he'd keep the recording to himself and figure out the radio mystery later. If he found someone who needed help, he'd have his emergency gear ready. 3 a.m., 3 hours until sunrise. He spent the time preparing his pack with the same methodical approach he'd used for crime scene investigations. First aid kit, trauma supplies, bandages, quick clot, splints, emergency blanket, water purification tablets, rope, 50 feet, headlamp with backup batteries, flares, his satellite phone fully charged, map and compass, knife, energy bars, 2 liters of water. He suited up in layers, base layer, fleece, waterproof shell, hiking boots worn in from 6 years of trails, gloves, his Ranger Service radio clipped to his shoulder, even though it probably wouldn't reach headquarters from that elevation. At 5:30, Mark started a pot of coffee and made himself eat. Oatmeal with dried fruit, protein bar. Hydration was critical at altitude. He filled his water bottles, checked his pack weight, 32 pounds, manageable for the terrain. He opened the station logbook and wrote his entry. October 12th, 0545, investigating possible emergency transmission. Coordinates north 48.73, west 121.42, north trail 3.7 miles. Solo reconnaissance. Expected return 1,000 hours. He left out the impossible parts. The recording on his phone would serve as backup if anyone questioned his decisions later. Dawn broke at 6:15, washing the mountains in gray light. Mark shouldered his pack, locked the station behind him, and started up the North Trail. The wind had died down, but the temperature held at 32 degrees. His breath formed clouds. The trail was empty, silent except for his boots on rock and frozen earth. He'd walked this path 100 times, but something felt different now. The woman's voice echoed in his memory, the fear in it, the specific coordinates, the impossible date. At 2.8 miles, Mark found the first sign that something was very wrong. Fresh boot prints in a patch of mud, maybe 4 hours old. Someone had come this way during the night. Mark knelt beside the prints, examining them with the same attention he'd given to crime scenes in Seattle. Women's hiking boots, size 7 or 8, medium treadwear, recent enough that the edges hadn't dried or crumbled. He pulled out his phone and took photos, noting the timestamp. 6:47 a.m., October 13th. The date hit him, October 13th. The woman on the radio had given today's date, but the transmission had come at 2:47 a.m. These prints were maybe 4 hours old, which would put them around 2:30 or 3 a.m. Right around the time of the broadcast. He stood and scanned the trail ahead. The prints continued upward toward the coordinates she'd given. No return prints. Whoever made these tracks had gone up but hadn't come back down. Mark moved faster now, following the trail as it climbed through pine forest and exposed rock. At 3.2 miles, he found disturbed vegetation, broken branches at waist height, like someone had pushed through in a hurry or stumbled. Fresh sap bleeding from a snapped pine bough. His radio crackled with static. He tried calling in. Station Echo to Bass. Do you copy? Nothing but white noise. The elevation and terrain blocked the signal like he'd expected. At 3.5 miles, the trail narrowed to a rocky ledge that curved around the mountain face. 30 feet to his right, the ground dropped away into a steep ravine filled with dense brush and scattered boulders. One wrong step, and you'd tumble 40 feet before hitting anything solid. He moved carefully, one hand on the rock wall, eyes scanning for more signs. Found them at 3.6 miles. Scrape marks on the trail edge where boots had slipped on loose gravel. Dark smudges on the rocks that might have been dirt or might have been something else. Mark pulled out his first aid kit and grabbed a latex glove, using it to touch one of the smudges. It came away red on the white rubber. Blood, fresh enough to still be slightly tacky. His pulse kicked up. The woman on the radio had said she was bleeding. This was real. Someone was hurt up here, moving toward the exact coordinates from the transmission. 3.7 miles. The GPS on his phone confirmed it. He'd reached the location she'd given. The trail opened into a small clearing with a view of the valley below. Evidence of recent presence scattered everywhere. A backpack leaning against a boulder, contents spilled across the ground. A sleeping bag half unrolled. A camp stove tipped on its side. And blood. A lot of it. Dark red puddles soaking into the dirt near the backpack. Drag marks leading toward the ravine edge. Mark approached the backpack carefully, checking for any sign of the owner. Found a wallet in the outside pocket. Washington State driver's license. Christine Valdez, female, 28 years old, Seattle address. Issue date on the license was current year, photo recent, but the date of birth made his stomach drop. Born April 7th, 1961. That would make her 62 years old, not 28. The photo showed a young woman, late 20s, dark hair, athletic build. Nothing matched. He pulled out his phone and searched the name. Found an old missing persons report from 1989. Christine Valdez, age 28, disappeared while hiking Mount Baker on October 13th. Last seen on the North Trail, never found. October 13th, 1989. 34 years ago today. Mark looked at the license again, then at the blood on the ground, then at the drag marks leading to the ravine edge. His hands were shaking now, not from cold but from the impossible mathematics of what he was seeing. He moved to the ravine edge and looked down. The ravine dropped 40 feet through loose rock and scrub brush before leveling into a narrow gully choked with fallen timber. Mark could see the drag marks continuing over the edge. Someone had either fallen or been pulled down. Fresh disturbances in the vegetation marked a trail through the brush below. He pulled the rope from his pack and secured it around a boulder, testing the anchor with his full body weight before committing. The rope held. He clipped his harness on and started backing over the edge. The descent took 3 minutes of careful movement, boots finding purchase on rock face in exposed roots. Halfway down, he spotted more blood on a jutting stone. At the bottom, Mark unclipped and followed the disturbance trail through dense brush. 50 feet into the ravine, he found a torn piece of fabric caught on a branch. Dark blue windbreaker material. Fresh tear. The fabric matched what Christine Valdez had been wearing in her license photo. The trail led deeper into the ravine, toward a section where the rock walls closed in and morning light barely penetrated. Mark moved carefully, aware that if he injured himself down here, no one knew his exact location. His radio was useless. He found the next sign 20 yards further, a handprint in blood on a boulder, as if someone had used it to pull themselves forward while crawling. The print was small, female, fingers spread wide from effort, still wet enough to glisten. The ravine opened into a small cave entrance, partially hidden by an overhang of rock and thick brush. The blood trail led directly inside. Mark pulled his flashlight, checked that his knife was accessible on his belt, and called out, "Ranger service, if you're in there, I'm here to help." Silence. No response. Just wind moving through the ravine and the distant sound of water dripping somewhere in the cave system. Mark entered the cave, a flashlight beam cutting through darkness. The space was larger than the entrance suggested, opening into a chamber about 15 feet across. The temperature dropped 10 degrees immediately, his breath visible in the beam of his light. The blood trail continued along the cave floor, leading deeper. But something else caught his attention. Written on the cave wall in what looked like blood, still wet and dripping, were words in a desperate scrawl. "It keeps happening. Find the station. Stop it before..." The message cut off mid-sentence, as if the writer had been interrupted or run out of strength. Mark's flashlight beam swept the rest of the chamber and stopped on something that made his blood run cold. A figure huddled in the far corner, back against the wall, hands pressed against a wound in her side. Christine Valdez, alive, looking exactly like her photo from 1989. She looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. Her mouth opened, but before she could speak, she whispered 4 words that made no sense. "You're too early." Mark moved toward her, dropping his pack and pulling out his first aid kit. "I'm Mark Chen, Ranger from Station Echo. I got your transmission. Let me see the wound." Christine pressed herself harder against the cave wall, shaking her head. "No, you don't understand. It hasn't happened yet. You being here now, this changes everything. You're bleeding. You need medical attention." Mark kept his voice calm. He could see blood seeping between her fingers, where she clutched her side. "Let me help you." "What time is it?" Her voice was urgent, desperate. Mark checked his watch. 7:23 a.m., October 13th. 7:23. She closed her eyes, breathing hard. "It happens at 10:47. That's when I die. I've died 34 times at 10:47 a.m. on October 13th. Every single time." Mark knelt 5 feet away, setting his first aid kit on the ground between them. "Christine, I need you to let me treat that wound. Then we can talk about what's happening." "You'll think I'm crazy. I heard your voice come from a radio with no power source at 2:47 this morning. You gave me these coordinates and today's date. I'm past thinking anything is crazy. She studied his face, evaluating him. Finally, she moved her hands away from her side. Blood soaked through her shirt, a ragged tear in the fabric over her left ribs. Mark moved closer, pulling on latex gloves and cutting away the cloth with trauma shears. The wound was a deep laceration, 4 inches long, bleeding freely but not arterial. It needed stitches and antibiotics, but it wasn't immediately fatal. He packed it with gauze and applied pressure. This needs proper medical care. I have a satellite phone. I can call for evacuation. No! She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. The moment you call for help, it triggers. I've tried everything. Every loop, I try something different. Call for rescue, hike out alone, hide in this cave, fight back. Nothing works. At 10:47, I die. Then October 13th starts again. Mark secured the bandage and sat back. You're telling me you're trapped in a time loop. You've lived this day 34 times. Since 1989, the first time I was hiking with my sister Sarah. She fell. I saved her, but I fell instead. Should have died that day. But something went wrong. The day keeps repeating. I keep dying, and it starts over. What kills you? Christine's eyes darted to the cave entrance. I don't know. It's different every time. Sometimes it looks like an animal. Sometimes it's just a distortion. Like reality itself is hunting me. It shows up around 10:30, and by 10:47, I'm dead. Mark checked his watch. 7:31. 3 hours and 16 minutes until 10:47. He looked at the message on the wall. You wrote that about Station Echo. I heard myself send that radio transmission. Future me or past me. But this loop, something's different. You came. No one has ever come before. Your sister Sarah, she survived. She should have died. I changed it. Maybe that's why this is happening. Mark made a decision. We're getting you out of this ravine and back to Station Echo. If something's coming at 10:30, I want defensible shelter and working communications. Can you walk? Christine nodded, testing her weight. She was shaky but mobile. Mark helped her to her feet. 3 hours to figure out how to break a 34-year loop. His training had taught him one thing. Never leave someone behind. Not again. This story takes time to craft. If you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Getting Christine out of the cave took 10 minutes of careful movement. Mark went first, testing each foothold before letting her follow. She moved slowly, one hand pressed against her bandaged side, the other gripping rocks for balance. The blood loss had weakened her, and Mark could see her struggling to maintain coordination. They reached the base of the ravine wall where his rope still hung. 40 feet of vertical climb with an injured person who'd already lost significant blood. Not ideal, but they didn't have options. I'll go up first and secure a hauling system, Mark said. Can you clip into a harness? Christine nodded, but her hands shook as she tried to work the buckles. Mark helped her, checking each connection twice. He rigged a simple pulley system using a carabiner and the rope, then made the climb himself. His shoulders burned by the time he reached the top. He anchored the pulley to the boulder and called down. Ready, I'm going to pull, but you need to walk your feet up the wall. Use your legs, not your arms. The ascent took longer than Mark wanted. Christine made it halfway before she had to stop, breathing hard, face pale. Mark held the rope steady, taking her full weight. Almost there. 30 seconds and you're up. She pushed through the last 20 feet, and Mark hauled her over the edge. She collapsed on the ground, gasping. Mark checked his watch. 7:52 a.m. They'd burned almost 30 minutes getting out of the ravine. We need to move, Mark said. Can you walk, or do I need to carry you? I can walk. Christine got to her feet, swaying. Mark steadied her, then handed her one of his water bottles. She drank half of it in long pulls. They started back down the trail toward Station Echo. With Christine injured, progress was slow. Every 100 yards, they had to stop so she could catch her breath. Mark kept scanning their surroundings, looking for any sign of the threat she described. At the 2-mile mark, Christine stumbled. Mark caught her before she hit the ground. How are you holding up? Dizzy, blood loss. She leaned against a tree, eyes closed. And it's starting. What's starting? Christine opened her eyes and Mark saw fear there that went beyond physical injury. Time. It doesn't feel right, like it's stretching and compressing. That's how it always begins. Mark didn't feel anything unusual, but he trusted what she was telling him. How long until it gets worse? Depends on the loop, but it always ends the same way at 10:47. Mark checked his watch. 8:17 a.m., 2.5 hours left. Station Echo was still 45 minutes away at their current pace. If they pushed hard, they could make it in 30 minutes. We're not stopping again until we reach the station, Mark said. I'll carry you if I have to, but we're getting there before 10:30. Christine pushed off from the tree. Then we need to move faster. They continued down the trail, Mark supporting most of her weight now. His legs burned from the effort, but he kept the pace steady. Behind them, something in the forest made a sound. Not wind, not an animal, but something that made the hair on Mark's neck stand up. Christine heard it too. Her grip on his arm tightened. It's found us. Mark didn't look back. He just moved faster, half carrying Christine now, focused on getting to Station Echo. The sound came again, closer, not footsteps. More like the air itself was tearing, a ripping noise that set Mark's teeth on edge. He risked a glance back and saw the forest looking wrong. Trees appeared in duplicate, overlapping like a photograph exposed twice. Don't look at it, Christine gasped. When you look directly at it, you see things. Timelines that didn't happen. Mark faced forward and moved faster. Station Echo came into view through the trees. They were still 200 yards out when the temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. His breath came out in white clouds. Frost formed on the pine needles around them. It's accelerating, Christine said. You being here, it's changing the pattern. Mark pushed forward, practically dragging Christine now. 100 yards, 50. The station door was visible. Behind them, that tearing sound intensified, and Mark heard Christine's voice screaming. But Christine was right next to him, silent except for labored breathing. That's me dying, she whispered, from a previous loop. Time's collapsing. 20 yards from the station, the trail ahead flickered. For a split second, Mark saw the station as it had been in 1994. Then it snapped back to present day. He reached the door and fumbled with his keys. The key slid into the lock. He turned it, shouldered the door open, and pulled Christine inside. Mark slammed the door and locked it. Through the window, the forest looked strange. Trees in the wrong positions. And something moving between the trees. A distortion, like heat shimmer, but wrong, darker. We're inside, Mark said. Christine had collapsed into the chair by the desk. She was shivering despite the warmth from the propane heater. It doesn't care about walls, but maybe with you here, something's different. Mark moved to the equipment wall and grabbed the satellite phone. No signal. He tried the radio. Static. Even the landline was dead, humming with interference. Communications are down, Mark said. It does that. Isolates the area. Christine's voice was getting weaker. What time is it? Mark checked his watch. 8:43 a.m. 2 hours and 4 minutes until 10:47. Mark looked around the station. Emergency supplies, first aid equipment, tools. Nothing that would stop a temporal anomaly. But he'd been in impossible situations before. Think like a detective. Christine saved her sister, changed the timeline, got trapped in a loop, dies at 10:47 every October 13th. Tell me about the first time, Mark said. 1989. What happened exactly? Christine looked up at him. Why does that matter? Because every pattern starts somewhere. If we understand why the loop began, maybe we can break it. Sarah and I were hiking. She went too close to the edge, started to slip. I grabbed her, pulled her back, but the ground gave way under me. I fell, should have died instantly. But you didn't. No, I woke up. October 13th, morning, back at the trailhead. Everything reset, except I remembered falling, remembered dying. Mark's mind raced. When does October 13th begin for you? Christine went still. 6 a.m. I always wake up at 6 a.m. on October 13th. Mark checked his watch. 8:46. Less than 2 hours until 10:47. We need to find the anchor point, Mark said. The thing keeping you trapped. And I think I know where it is. Mark moved to the storage closet where he'd heard the transmission. The Motorola radio sat on the shelf exactly where he'd found it. The radio, Mark said. When did your sister donate it to the station? Christine looked confused. What radio? After you disappeared in '89, Sarah donated emergency equipment to Station Echo, including this radio, the one you and Sarah used on your hike. Mark grabbed the radio and turned it over. The engraving was there, barely visible under the dust. SV, Forever Grateful, CV 1989. Christine stood slowly. She stared at the radio. That was ours. Sarah kept it after. I didn't know she donated it here. This radio transmitted your emergency call at 2:47 this morning. No power source, no batteries. Mark set it on the desk. This is the anchor. Your sister's grief, your death, all tied to this piece of equipment on the mountain where you died. Christine reached out and touched the radio. The moment she made contact, every light in the station flickered. The temperature dropped. Through the window, Mark saw the distortion surge closer. It knows, Christine whispered. Mark grabbed his knife. Then we destroy it. Cut the connection. Wait. Every loop, I've tried to break things. Nothing works. What if destroying the radio makes it worse? Or what if that's exactly what we need to do? You said I'm different. Maybe you needed someone from outside the loop to break the anchor. The lights flickered again. The propane heater sputtered and died. Mark's watch started running backward. 8:45, 8:44. Time's going the wrong direction, Christine said. Mark looked out the window. The distortion was closer, maybe 50 feet from the station, and in its movement, he could see shapes, versions of Christine, dying in different ways. He made a decision. Grabbed the radio and smashed it against the desk. The plastic casing cracked. He hit it again. The faceplate shattered, internal components scattering. The distortion outside screamed. Not a human sound, like metal tearing. Mark kept smashing the radio until it was pieces. Circuit boards, wires, broken plastic. His hands bled from gripping the jagged edges, but he didn't stop until the radio was completely destroyed. The light stopped flickering. The temperature stabilized. Mark's watch resumed moving forward. 8:47, 8:48. Normal time. Through the window, the distortion had stopped advancing. It hung there 50 feet from the station, writhing. Christine stared at the destroyed radio, then at Mark. In 34 loops, no one ever tried that, because no one else was here. Did it work? Mark asked. I don't know. The loop never broke before 10:47. She checked her bandage. Blood had soaked through, but not as much as it should have. But something changed. Mark's satellite phone crackled to life. Static, then a voice. Station Echo. This is Ranger Headquarters. Do you copy? Mark pressed the transmit button. This is Station Echo. I copy. We have an injured hiker who needs immediate medical evacuation. Copy that. Helicopters 20 minutes out. Nature of injury. Mark looked at Christine. She was crying, silent tears running down her face. Lacerations and blood loss, Mark said. But I think she's going to make it. Outside, the distortion began to fade, breaking apart like fog in sunlight. The forest returned to normal. October 13, 9 a.m., 23 minutes into a day that Christine Valdez had lived 34 times before, but this time, she might actually survive it. Mark set the satellite phone down and moved to the window, watching the forest return to normal. The distortion was gone, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Too easy. 34 loops broken by smashing a radio. Christine sat at the desk, still crying, her hands shaking. Mark checked his watch. 9:03 a.m., 1 hour and 44 minutes until 10:47. The helicopter would arrive in 15 minutes. They'd extract Christine, get her to a hospital, and she'd live past 10:47 for the first time in 34 years. Except Mark couldn't shake the doubt. Christine, he said, turning from the window. In all 34 loops, what's the one constant? She looked up at him, wiping tears from her face. I die at 10:47. Always. And the loop resets at 6 a.m. You wake up, and it's October 13th again. Yes. Mark paced the small station. But where do you wake up when the loop resets? Christine went very still. The trailhead. I'm always at the trailhead parking lot at 6 a.m. in my car. The same hike you took with Sarah in 1989. Yes. Mark stopped pacing. So the loop resets you to a specific location at a specific time, the moment you arrive to start the hike that killed you. I never really thought about it that way. And where's your car now? Christine's eyes widened. Still at the trailhead. Mark grabbed his map. The trailhead parking lot was 8 miles down the access road. If the loop was tied to that location, then maybe destroying the radio hadn't actually broken the loop. Maybe it had just disrupted it temporarily. We need to get you away from this mountain, Mark said, before 10:47. The helicopter might not be enough. Mark checked his watch. 9:06. The radio on the desk crackled to life. Not the destroyed Motorola, the standard Forest Service radio. A voice came through, female, panicked. Help! North Trail! Bleeding! October 13th! Christine's voice. The same transmission Mark had heard at 2:47 a.m. Mark grabbed the radio. This is Station Echo. Who is this? More static, then the voice again. Mark Chen, Station Echo. You have to stop it. You have to find the transmission cut off. Christine was staring at the radio, her face white. That was me, but I didn't send that. I'm right here. The lights flickered. The temperature dropped. Through the window, Mark saw the distortion reforming in the tree line, darker than before. Christine saw it too. It's coming back, but it's too early. We changed the pattern, Mark said. Now it's adapting. The distortion moved closer, faster than before. Mark checked his watch. 9:09 a.m. The helicopter was still at least 10 minutes out. We're leaving, Mark said. Now. We hiked down to the access road and flagged down the helicopter there. That's 3 miles. I can barely walk. Then I carry you. Mark shouldered his pack. Because staying here means you die. Again. Outside, the distortion had reached the station perimeter, 50 feet away and closing. Mark grabbed Christine and headed for the door. They burst through the station door into cold morning air. Mark half-carried Christine down the steps and onto the access road. Behind them, the distortion pressed against the station walls. Mark didn't look back. He focused on moving forward, supporting Christine's weight. 3 miles to the lower access point where the helicopter could land. At their current pace, maybe 40 minutes. His watch showed 9:12 a.m., 1 hour and 35 minutes until 10:47. They made it 200 yards before the distortion caught up. Mark felt it before he saw it, a pressure wave that made his ears pop. The air temperature dropped 30 degrees in seconds. Frost spread across the gravel road. It's faster now, Christine said. Every loop, when I tried to run, it was always slower than this. Mark looked back. The distortion was flowing down the road after them, like liquid darkness. Trees bent away from it, and in its center, Mark could see shapes moving. Versions of Christine dying, over and over. How do we fight something that's not physical? Christine asked. We don't fight it. We outrun it. Mark adjusted his grip. The helicopter is coming. We just need to stay ahead. They pushed forward. The distortion kept pace, staying exactly 100 feet behind them. At the half-mile mark, Christine's legs gave out. Mark caught her, but she couldn't stand anymore. Too much blood loss. Leave me, Christine said. Not happening. Mark shifted her weight, getting her onto his back in a fireman's carry. It would slow him down, but he wasn't leaving her. Not after Danny. He started moving again, Christine's weight pressing down on his shoulders. His legs burned, but he kept the pace steady. 9:23 a.m., 1 hour and 24 minutes until 10:47. The distortion surged forward suddenly, closing the gap from 100 feet to 50 in seconds. Mark pushed harder, 40 feet behind them, 30. Then he heard it, the distant thump of helicopter rotors, coming from the south. Christine, stay with me. The helicopter's close. I can hear it, she whispered. But what if the distortion stops it? The access road curved ahead, opening into a wider section. Emergency landing zone. Mark had called in evacuations from this spot before. The distortion was 20 feet behind them. His watch started running backward. 9:22, 9:21. The helicopter appeared over the tree line, a search and rescue bird with Forest Service markings. Mark saw the pilot spot them, saw the aircraft begin its descent. Then the distortion reached them. Mark felt Christine yank backward, torn from his grip. She screamed, hitting the ground, and the distortion wrapped around her. Mark didn't think. He dove into the distortion after her. The moment he entered it, his perception shattered. He saw 34 versions of this moment. Saw Christine die 34 different ways. Saw himself fail to save her in every possible timeline. Except one. The timeline where he held on. Mark's fingers closed around Christine's wrist. He pulled. The distortion fought back, pulling harder, trying to drag her toward 1047. But Mark had survived impossible situations before, and he'd made a promise 6 years ago, never again. He pulled Christine out of the distortion with everything he had. They fell backward onto the gravel road. He gasped, rolled, pulled Christine away. The distortion surged after them, but something had changed. The loop recognized him now as an element that shouldn't exist. The helicopter was landing 50 feet away, rotors kicking up dust. 2 paramedics jumped out, running toward them with a stretcher. "She needs immediate extraction," Mark shouted. "Blood loss and—" The distortion slammed into him from behind. Not physical impact, temporal. Mark felt himself split across multiple timelines, but one choice remained constant, holding on to Christine's wrist. The paramedics reached them. One grabbed Christine, checking her vitals. The other pulled Mark to his feet. Mark was watching the distortion pull back, reforming. His watch showed 9:31 a.m., 1 hour and 16 minutes until 10:47. "Get her on the helicopter now," Mark said. "Don't wait for me. Just go. Ranger protocol requires—" "Now!" The paramedics moved, lifting Christine onto the stretcher. The distortion lunged forward. Mark pulled an emergency flare from his pack and ignited it. Bright red flame and smoke. The distortion recoiled from it. Not from the light, but from the present moment the flare represented. A fixed point in time, burning in real time. Mark held the flare up. "Get her loaded. I'll hold it back." The paramedics carried Christine toward the helicopter. Mark backed toward them, keeping the flare between himself and the distortion. They reached the helicopter. The paramedics loaded Christine inside. One of them shouted, "You coming?" Mark looked at the distortion. It was massive now, filling the road behind him. If he got in the helicopter, would it follow? Christine's voice, weak but clear, came from inside. "Mark, get in, please." He threw the flare at the distortion, turned, and sprinted for the helicopter. The pilot was already pulling pitch. Mark dove through the open door as the aircraft rose, the paramedic grabbing his arm and hauling him inside. The distortion surged upward after them. Mark watched as it stretched, tried to follow. But as they climbed past 100 feet, the distortion began to thin. By 200 feet, it was fragmenting. At 300 feet, it was gone. Mark collapsed against the bulkhead. The paramedic slammed the door shut and moved to Christine, checking her vitals, starting an IV. The helicopter banked south toward the hospital in Bellingham. Mark checked his watch. 9:39 a.m., 1 hour and 8 minutes until 10:47. They'd be at the hospital in 20 minutes. Christine would be in surgery before the deadline, assuming the loop was actually broken. Christine's hand found his, her grip weak. "Did we do it?" Mark squeezed back. "I don't know, but you're still here, still breathing. That's more than you've had in 34 years. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not leaving me." Mark thought about Danny, about 6 years of isolation. I wasn't going to make that mistake again. The helicopter flew south, leaving Mount Baker behind, racing against a deadline that had killed Christine Valdez 34 times. In 68 minutes, they'd know if they'd broken the loop, or if October 13th would start again. The helicopter touched down at Peace Health St. Joseph Medical Center in Bellingham at 9:57 a.m., 50 minutes until 10:47. The paramedics had Christine on a gurney and moving through the emergency entrance before the rotor stopped spinning. Mark followed, his legs unsteady after the adrenaline crash. A trauma team met them at the doors. The lead paramedic rattled off vitals. Female 28, deep laceration left side, Significant blood loss, possible shock, BP 80/50 and dropping. The doctor took one look at Christine and started barking orders. Get her to trauma 2. I need 2 units O negative. Start a second IV line. They wheeled Christine through double doors. Mark tried to follow, but a nurse stopped him. Sir, you need to stay in the waiting area. Are you family? No, I'm the ranger who called it in. Then we'll need a statement, but right now, you need to let us work. The nurse guided him toward a waiting room. Have a seat. Someone will update you. Mark sat in a plastic chair and checked his watch. 10:02 a.m. 45 minutes until 10:47. Through the windows, he could see Mount Baker in the distance. They were 30 miles from the mountain, 30 miles from where Christine had died 34 times. Was it far enough? A hospital security guard approached. Sir, I need to ask you some questions. What's your name? Mark Chen. I'm a ranger at Station Echo. The guard pulled out a notepad. And how did you find her? Mark had prepared for this during the helicopter ride. He couldn't tell them the truth, so he stuck to facts that made sense. I received a distress call early this morning. Emergency transmission giving coordinates on the North Trail. When I investigated, I found her injured in a ravine. I stabilized her and called for evacuation. Did she tell you her name? Christine Valdez. The guard wrote it down. We'll need to verify her identity and contact next of kin. Mark thought about Sarah Valdez, Christine's sister. She has a sister, Sarah Valdez. She lives in Seattle. We'll track her down. The guard closed his notebook. Mark was alone in the waiting room. The TV mounted on the wall showed a local news broadcast. October 13th, just another Tuesday for everyone else. Not a day that had repeated 34 times. Mark couldn't sit still. He stood in pace, checking his watch every 30 seconds. 10:14 a.m., 33 minutes until 10:47. Through the trauma bay doors, he could hear activity, voices calling out medical terms, equipment beeping. Was Christine still alive in there? Or had the loop found a way to kill her even here? At 10:23 a.m., a doctor emerged from the trauma bay. She was in her 40s, wearing scrubs spotted with blood. Mark stood immediately. Are you the ranger who brought her in? Yes, how is she? Stable. We've got the bleeding under control and we're prepping her for surgery. The laceration is deep, but it missed major organs. She's lucky you found her when you did. Can I see her? Briefly, but we need to get her to the OR soon. The doctor led Mark through the trauma bay doors. Christine was on a gurney surrounded by monitors and IV stands. She looked small under the hospital blankets, but her eyes were open. When she saw Mark, she reached out. Mark took her hand, feeling her fingers cold in his grip. What time is it? Christine asked. Mark checked his watch. 10:28, 19 minutes. We're going to make it, Christine said, but her grip tightened. Aren't we? Mark wanted to tell her yes, but he'd learned not to make promises he couldn't keep. I don't know, Mark said, but you're here, 30 miles from the mountain, surrounded by doctors. That's different from every other loop. Christine nodded weakly. Every other time, I was alone on the mountain. This is the furthest I've made it. A nurse approached. We need to move her to pre-op now. Wait. Christine's grip tightened. Don't leave. If the loop resets, I need to know someone else remembers. You're not crazy, Mark said, and I'm not leaving. I'll be right here when you wake up. They wheeled Christine toward the operating room. Mark watched her go, then checked his watch. 10:32 a.m., 15 minutes until 10:47. He walked back to the waiting room, but he couldn't sit. Paced instead, wearing a path in the linoleum. 10:37, 10 minutes, 10:41, 6 minutes, 10:44, 3 minutes. Mark walked to the window and looked out at Mount Baker. From here it looked peaceful, not like a mountain that had trapped someone for 34 years. 10:46, 1 minute. Mark's watch ticked forward. 55 seconds. 50, 45. He thought about Christine in surgery, doctors working on her laceration. Would she even know if the loop reset? 30 seconds. Mark's breath caught. This was watching someone's entire existence hang on, whether reality decided to cooperate or reset. 15 seconds. Through the trauma bay doors, he could hear the steady beep of monitors. Normal hospital sounds. No screaming, no temporal distortion. 10 seconds. Mark counted each one. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 10:47 a.m. The hospital didn't explode. Reality didn't fracture. Mark's watch kept ticking forward. 10:47 and 1 second. 10:47 and 2 seconds. 10:48 a.m. The doors to the surgical wing opened. A nurse walked out, saw Mark, and approached. "Are you here for Christine Valdez?" Mark's heart stopped. "Yes. Is she?" "She's in surgery now. Doctor says it's going well. Probably another hour, then recovery." "She's alive." The nurse looked at him strangely. "Yes, she's alive. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Mark said. But he wasn't fine. He was watching Christine Valdez live past the moment she died 34 times. They'd done it. They'd broken the loop. Or at least they'd survived one cycle past 10:47. The real test would come at 6 a.m. tomorrow. If Christine woke up in a hospital bed instead of at a trailhead parking lot, then the loop was truly broken. But for now, she was alive, and that was enough. Mark stayed through Christine's surgery, through her recovery. At 11 p.m., a nurse told him he could see her. She was in a private room on the 3rd floor, awake but groggy. He found her room and knocked softly. Christine turned her head. When she saw him, tears started running down her face. "We made it," she whispered. "It's 11 p.m. I'm still here." Mark pulled a chair next to her bed. "How do you feel?" "Like I got cut open, but I feel it. The pain is real. That means I'm real. I'm not resetting." She reached for his hand. "Thank you." They sat in silence. The hospital hummed around them. Normal sounds of normal life. "What happens now?" Christine asked. "I disappeared in 1989. I should be 62, but I'm 28. "We keep it simple," Mark said. "You got injured hiking. A ranger found you. We don't explain what can't be explained." "What about Sarah, my sister? She thinks I've been dead for 34 years. The hospital is trying to contact her. You'll figure out what to tell her. But Christine, she's 62 now. You saved her life in 89. She got to live those 34 years because of you." Christine closed her eyes. "And I lost them. But you're free now. You get the rest of your life." Christine looked at him. "Will you stay? Just until 6 a.m. I need to know someone else is here when the clock hits that time." Mark nodded. "I'll stay." He kept his promise, sat in the chair as the hours ticked by. Christine dozed fitfully, waking every hour to check the clock. Mark stayed awake, watching the monitors. At 5:45 a.m., Christine woke up fully. 15 minutes. 15 minutes, Mark confirmed. They watched the clock together. 5:50, 5:55. 6 a.m. approached like a deadline. 5:59. Christine grabbed Mark's hand. "If I wake up at the trailhead, tell Sarah I tried." "You're not going anywhere," Mark said. 6 a.m. The hospital room didn't disappear. Christine didn't vanish. The monitors kept beeping. October 14th, 6 a.m. 34 years after Christine Valdez should have died on Mount Baker. But she didn't die. She lived. Christine started sobbing. Not from fear, from relief, from 34 years of hell finally ending. Mark squeezed her hand and let her cry. 20 minutes later, a nurse knocked. "Ms. Valdez, your sister is here. Sarah Valdez." Christine looked at Mark, panic in her eyes. "I don't know if I can do this." "You survived 34 deaths," Mark said. "You can survive this too." The nurse opened the door. A woman walked in, 62 years old, gray hair. But the face was Christine's face, age 3 decades. Sarah Valdez stopped in the doorway. "Christy," Sarah's voice broke. "They said your name was Christine Valdez, but that's impossible. My sister disappeared in 89. You look exactly like her." Christine sat up, wincing. "Sarah, it's me. I know it doesn't make sense, but it's really me." Sarah moved closer. "You have the scar on your eyebrow from when you fell off your bike when you were 12. "I remember," Christine said. "You helped me lie to Mom about it." Sarah's face crumpled. She moved to the bed and pulled Christine into a hug. "I thought you were dead for 34 years. How are you here? Christine looked at Mark. He nodded. I was trapped, Christine said. On the mountain. In the day we were hiking, October 13th. I couldn't get out, but Mark found me. He broke me free. Sarah looked at Mark. You're the ranger. Yes, ma'am. How did you find her after 34 years? Mark thought about the radio transmission, about the time loop, about promises made and kept. I heard someone asking for help, Mark said, and I answered. Sarah held her sister tighter. Mark stood up quietly, giving them the reunion they'd both earned. He walked to the window and looked out at Mount Baker in the distance, the mountain where Christine Valdez had died 34 times, the mountain where Mark Chen had finally saved someone. Maybe that was enough to quiet the ghosts. Maybe that was enough to let him go home. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment and share it. It helps the next person find their way here.